Welcome everybody on the DVM Group's panel talk about circular economy, and thank you for Design Week Budapest to have the opportunity to do this talk and use their platform. The concept of our talk is to talk about circular economy, but from three different sectors, three different point of view, and we would like to know a bit more about what's going on in the fashion industry, product design, and the construction field. And at the end, we try to figure out if there is any touch points between the different sectors, and we will see what is the future with those industries. And let me introduce our participants. From the fashion industry, there is Veronica Pravato from Italy, and she's the senior sustainable manager of Vanguards. There is Kinga Seke, who is the sustainable manager of Nanushka. And from the product design field, there is Andreas Schumfalvi, who is the managing director of Flying Object. And here it is Apró, who is the sustainable consultant of DVM Group. And my name is Zsuzsanna Hodovan. I am the service designer of DVM Group. So we are extremely happy to do this discussion about circular economy, because at the DVM Group, sustainability is one of the pillars of our services. So for us, it's very important to talk about green solutions and everything what is about sustainability, and see other industries. My first question is, what does it mean, circular economy, in your field, and how can you design your own supply chain? I would like if you could talk about it from the fashion field firstly. So maybe Kinga or Veronica could introduce a little bit about
Sure.
the circular economy.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm hearing my voice back. If you could.
Yep.
It's great. So in fashion, it basically means to design out waste and pollution, and to keep products in use as long as we can, and to keep materials as well in use as long and as much as we can, and to regenerate our natural environment and ecosystems. So these are the basic principles, and why it's circularity is because it's about a circulation of materials and resources. And if we imagine that in nature there is the eternal circle of life and there is no waste, that is the concept that we try to achieve within industrial frameworks, which is not happening right now because we live in a take, make, dispose linear consumption system. And that's what we try to change by using renewable resources. And then what we produce, we should use as long as we can. And after it has reached the end of its life cycle, we should be able to utilize those materials and connect them back into the production and use circle. And part of this circle is also to not use anything that is harmful to the environment or human health. So that would be my short answer to this question from the perspective of this industry, but I think it's quite generic and applies to most fields.
Yeah, it's Veronica here. I'm just jumping in also from the fashion industry perspective. And as Kinga mentioned, following the principles really of what a circular economy is, there's three important steps that were highlighted from her. And, one is designing out waste and pollution. And, it's most of the times, and this applies to all industries really, it's how do we design something so it does not end up as waste or polluting the environment. And it's a really important step also in the fashion industry because it can take different approaches. So, for example, it can be on the material aspect, where we choose materials that have a higher percentage of monomaterials. So we ensure that that has durability and also can be circulated at the end of its lifetime. But also it can come across as a new business model where, you know, we do really try and make that product circulate for as long as possible. So the key aspects that in the fashion industry have been highlighted in the past few years are around materials, health and safety, and how we can ensure they circulate through new business models as well.
Great, thank you for your answer. Andres, there is a need for long-term thinking products, it seems. And can you tell me, in the product design field, what is the role of the designers at the moment in this context? You're muted, please.
So, actually, circularity in product design means more that so products are designers have to create systems rather than products. It means more system, less product, and no product exists without system at all. And designers should think more about a web and network of users rather than one user, as it was for a long time before, and they should use the new tools that make their products efficient and make efficient use of materials, use most recycled materials more recycled as possible, and design for repair, design for take back, and design for disassembly and being able to refurbish. So I mean, you should designers should first think about, do we need anything physical for this problem? And then if we decide with the client together that yes, we need something that is physical, it cannot be solved with an application, it's not the software is not enough for it, then we start to create a whole system that's taking these aspects very, very seriously.
Okay, so you need to educate sometimes your clients during the design process?
Yes, there is a part of education in it, and I think it's very important to do it like being very, very supportive with the client, because sometimes it's not really obvious for them. I mean, for example, a newer startup might think of these aspects, but if you work for a company that has products for like 20 years and they just want to start there to renew their lineup, then it's very, very rare that they think of these aspects.
Okay, thank you. And Dia, my next question is, I'm going to ask you, at the construction field, it's been quite a long time ago. There are some sustainability standards and certifications. And can you talk a little bit about it and introduce the system and how did it become more and more important in the building and construction field?
Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah, in the building industry, there are green building certifications that are on the market for a couple of years now already, or already more than a decade. And eventually these systems evolved continuously over time, and nowadays they address, of course, circularity and how to not waste materials and be more energy and material efficient. With regards to materials, I think the two main points where these questions are addressed in these systems are, first of all, when there is some kind of demolition before constructing something new, how would you handle waste? How could you possibly reduce waste that ends up in the landfill? So here we have an approach where we first seek opportunities to reuse the materials as they are, so that you don't have to really do anything with it. No process is going on, but right away it's reused in some other construction project. And if it's not possible, then we seek opportunities to reuse it somewhere else. You can also reuse materials when you prepare a new material from it, let's say. And the least favorable is if you cannot reuse it in any kind of form, then you can have it in the landfill, of course. But the aim is really to reduce this amount that ends up in the landfill. And the other part where these systems address circularity with regards to materials is where they ask for third-party certifications about the materials themselves. So it means there are, for instance, environmental product declarations which address the total life cycle of materials. So the construction materials are evaluated from their extraction, manufacturing process, their transportation, when they are built in the actual building, their life service there, and what happens with them after the end of their life cycle. And there are other certificates which specifically address what is the constitution of these materials. So what ingredients are there? Are they harmful for the environment? And I think this is very useful when the question comes to recycling or reuse, because you specifically know what is included in that type of construction material and what can you do with it. So it's really a transparent system, and more manufacturers are now producing these kind of certificates for their products. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Veronica and Kinga, people consider fashion industry as the second most polluting sector at the moment, but it seems they are becoming one of the pioneers of circular economy. And could you talk about a little bit how did fashion industry change their position? How did they change the business models, or how can you change the business models through these things?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I would like to start in saying that the fact that was mentioned about the fashion industry being the second most polluting industry in our planet is not necessarily true. And the reason why that is because the methodology that is used to measure it is not proven, or it does not take into account a sample that is big enough to actually measure it in an appropriate way. And there may be some tiers that are missing as well, or are not accurately measured. So, you know, it doesn't mean that the fashion industry does not have an impact. It certainly does, but I would steer away from classifying it into as the most polluting or the second most polluting, because it can really be challenging to define that. Nevertheless, it has been, you know, that fact has pushed the industry towards doing more. And really taking accountability towards moving into a more circular model. And I think it's been, you know, in the past 3 years, and especially when the Ellen MacArthur Foundation launched the Make Fashion Circular working group, which is it's a working group of many brands that work together and collaborate in defining what is the circular economy in the fashion industry, and how can we really do create and generate better systems, not only products, but also systems that enable the flourishing of a circular economy at a global scale. In terms of what is and how is that been happening really, or how in the fashion industry is pioneering, I do think that the fashion industry is doing quite a lot to improve its impacts and improve its ecosystems. And I think that's due, to also these facts that are coming up, to pressure from the outside, from customers wanting more, to hear more, and also the kind of our wholesale clients in general wanting, the public wanting to be aware of what are the impacts of each product and how we can improve it in that. It's also, coming from probably lifestyle choices and how are we able to buy products or own products that have a good impact on people, society, and bring prosperity rather than pollution and challenges to our ecosystems.
Yeah, what I would just add to that is that, that exact fact that you mentioned, that it's the second polluting industry, might be questioned due to like provability, but there are some interesting facts which are definitely shocking, like that the number of items has more than doubled since the millennium, which is just 2 decades. And the fashion industry is growing in a very rapid pace, which is meaning that we also heavily rely on natural and material resources, inputs, and energy, and that is putting a big pressure on our ecosystems. And there has been a recent report, Fashion on Climate, which came out that says that if we keep staying on the current trajectory, we will emit twice as much carbon. That would make us able to keep the Paris Agreement goals of not rising the temperature with more than 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees lately. So fashion is a growing industry, heavily reliant on material resources. And if we do not insert mitigation and actions which reduce our impact throughout the supply chain, and the supply chain is really long from field to the final product and throughout the life cycle of the product, and up until it ends up in landfill or possibly it should be reused. It's a really long chain with a lot of possibilities to improve at every point. And currently we only so garment to garment recycling exists in less than 1% of the whole material stream, and that number should definitely be improved. There is another like 12%. It was from a report in 2015, but it says that like there is another 12% which goes to less valuable cycles, like materials from the fashion industry, from textiles, go to insulation, stuffing materials, and this degraded value usage, which obviously won't get recycled after it gets to that cycle. So our responsibility is to create circular systems. And this heavily relies on the recycling technologies, which are currently developing, but not at scale yet. And I think Veronica could add more about that. And it's interesting to hear that in the construction industry, certifications matter a lot, and that's the same is true to the fashion industry. We also do use a lot of certifications, and that is sort of our sight in the dark night, because when we source a fabric, we cannot really know how it was produced, where it was produced, what were the conditions, were the ethical, is the input indeed recycled. And there are the strict standards like the global recycling standard, which proves that if a material has this certification, that is almost 100% sure that it's indeed made of recycled content. And the same is for example, organic cotton. Global Organic Cotton Standard tells us that that cotton, we can rely on the credibility of the material, and that is indeed from an organic resource. And the other thing that we need to systemically improve in the industry is what Veronica has mentioned, and maybe I could expand a bit more on it, is about building circular business models. These are not sci-fi concepts. It's mostly about, for example, resale and our industry discovering the potential in these business models as a new source of revenue even. Like if there is a huge resale market, and it's also becoming a trend, is the second-hand market. There are brands launching their own resale platforms like COS, and even Gucci has launched in partnership with the Real, and just to make platform for all the goods that are out there on the market and in use with the shrinking usage, because there is a tendency that people use the products less and less. Product life cycle has shrunk close to 40% in the last 2 decades, which is a rapid shrink. We produce more and more products and use them less and less, and this just leads us to, in the current system, this just leads to more piles of waste, and this should definitely be turned back somehow. And resale is, for example, a business model which facilitates to keep products in use more at a new user, or rental and sharing systems are considered part of the business models, because with the same resource we can satisfy the same amount of needs as if it's just a selling system. Like there are 10 people needing the same product, they will buy 10 products. But if they rent, for example, all the 10 people rent the same item, then we can solve the same amount of needs with less resource, which is great. And it would definitely need a switch in the mindset that maybe I don't have to have a wardrobe. I could just subscribe to a rental platform and get my weekly dosage of garments in form of a rental, and that would sort of shrink this huge overproduction problem of the world a bit. Or there is the repair and refurbishment. We could also call them business models, but providing repair is just an essential initial step that every brand should provide for their customers. And then, as Andris highlighted, it should definitely be part of the design thinking that garments should be repairable. And for example, Patagonia has this Worn Wear line where they actually refurbish already used garments and put together parts which are still good. And of course, this certainly has some visual characteristic, but that fits very nicely with an outdoor brand. Maybe in case of Nanushka, I could hardly imagine putting together like 2 parts of satin items which are still good. So it definitely has some design characteristic that goes with upcycling and refurbishment, but interestingly, it's also becoming part of the trends. And last but not least, recycling is a huge part of these business models, because all the materials that we produce, and we put a lot of energy in creating these materials, are very, very valuable, and they represent material and monetary value, which we should not let go wasted. There is potential in collecting back textiles, sorting them, and recycling those fibers as much as we can. But I think it was very nice to get familiar with what are the current obstacles in recycling, and what does the system need for really be a working system. And I think Veronica could explain that very well. if you could help me out here.
Yes, so of course, yeah, I mean, it's the recycling in part of a circular economy, however, should really be the last step. I think everyone up to now has highlighted how steps should be repair, refreshing, because we need to reuse those materials before they end up in landfill or being unused in warehouses, to really reduce the pressure placed on our planet and resources, the limited resources that we have. When it comes to textile to textile recycling, we are, as a global system, at a very early stages of working with this technology and discovering what it can offer to us. There's mainly two streams for textile to textile recycling, and one is the mechanical recycling and the other one is the chemical recycling. When it comes to mechanical recycling, we can think of cotton being shredded and then spun and then made into a yarn and then again into a textile. But then again, we have limitations to how many times that material can be recycled mechanically, because what happens, especially with cotton, is that the more that we recycle it, the fiber gets shorter and shorter. So when we respun it and we remake the yarn, we have breakages problems. So the yarn is not as consistent. So there's a limitation there, for example, to how many times we can reuse and recycle this material. It could be, for example, solved through chemical recycling, because chemical recycling, what it does is that it breaks down the fiber to the monomers, and then it remakes the polymer, and then it's made into a yarn. So it basically takes the element back to its beginning, and then it remakes it. So it enables the material to be recycled and repurposed more than once or more than twice. However, here, for example, we have some challenges in material separation. Key things that Kinga was highlighting is the fact that currently when the materials get to a sorting facility, and a sorting facility is basically a company that they receive different batches of materials and they review the qualities and they send them to the right person. This is already a step further, because right now there are challenges even at the sorting facility when many of us, I'm guilty of this as well, cut off the care label on the garment because maybe it bothers us, and that's where we have the information on the composition of the material. And in the textile industry, knowing the composition is essential for us to know what is the stream we have to put it into. Otherwise, it's a waste. It's waste that we are probably going to downcycle and use as mattresses, stuffing, or sofas or pillows, and etc. So this is the first step, is ensuring that we can have the composition on the material, on the garment, to be there for as long as possible. And there are some technologies that are coming up to prevent this issue from arising. And these are birth certificates and birth passports that we can generate. So we can digitize our products through QR codes or NFC chips. So when the sorters scans them, they can find all the information of this garment on a unique web page, where they can find exactly where it was produced, what are the chemical standards, who is the company who produced it, what certificates it may have, and the composition, which is, as we said, essential. So that's the first step, knowing what is the material made up. The second challenge that we have is mono fibers vs mixed fibers. When we have monofibers like 100% cotton, it's very easy to recycle because the quality of the fiber is better when we recycle, respun it, and remake the yarn. So, but when we have, for example, say 50% cotton and 50% polyester, it becomes already challenging. And there's, 50% and 50% is an easy example, but there's fibers and yarns that have maybe 4 or 5 different materials in them, like mixing synthetics and wool or cotton. So then it's where it becomes really challenging, and we can't really at the moment recycle those yarns or repurpose them. So this is where technology can support, but also that's why initially we mentioned it's part of the designing out waste. It's part of the systems that Andres and Kinga were already mentioning, is how do we design out waste and pollution from the system? When we are designing something for a circular economy, we're not just designing the product, we are designing already the systems that it has to go through, and how can we ensure that those systems are going to actually work and be serviced as they need. So the technology and really ensuring that we have these in place are essential to really reduce the resources consumed. When it comes to technologies available, there are a lot of startups working on it, and there's been great improvement in this area in the past 3 to 5 years. One of the key aspects that is really missing is investment. Building a plant that enables recycling takes time and also large financial input. So it's also a matter of funding financial investment for these startups that are providing a service for the circular economy.
Wow.
What I would just add to that, sorry, I just wanted to add an illustration to Veronica's words, because I know she participated in the denim redesign workshop with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, how to make denim circular. And with the current stage of technology, you defined a rule that if a designer makes a denim, there should be no more percentage of elastane than 2%. So make the denim minimum 98% cotton, because that's what the recycling system at the moment can handle. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And the reason why, we stress so much the importance of designing for the current systems that we have, because even though we can be hopeful and positive that technologies will catch up in the next few years, we have to design for the current systems that we have. And also it gets with denim, elastane, it really does ruin the fiber, and it gets really hard when we are recycling it because it's a synthetic material that is elastic. So it makes it really challenging. There are other elements to that jeans redesign, which are, for example, the use of trims as well. So metal components and zips, and how are they placed, or are they easily removable? Because at the moment, the challenge is that you can't really remove rivets. There's not such machine that removes rivets. It needs to be done by hand, and that adds a lot of time and cost to it. So not many people are doing it because it's a really challenging process. So what they're doing now is cutting off the top part up to the crotch of the jeans. And so that part where the rivets and the zip is basically going into landfill. Only one part, or only the legs of the denim are being recycled. So these are other parts that, we need to think of. It's not only about the main material, it's about all the components that we put into a product.
Okay, thank you so much for the very detailed explanation. It seems every part of our object has a role in the chain. And it was very interesting what you said, Kinga, about the supply chain, that it's there is a lot of undiscovered touch points where another industry could maybe join to the chain. Do you have any experience about that? Like maybe in the construction field, there is more example, like in the fit out design, we know a lot of products what has a really clear supply chain, and they recycle materials from the fashion industry or the textile industry. Could you talk about it a little bit, Dia? What's your experience?
Yeah, I think the construction industry is a little bit ahead in this thinking. And as I mentioned before, with this increased transparency of materials, I guess it is easier to recycle or reuse materials. I think it's still a really narrow chain, because also the construction industry rather thinks how to reuse building materials in their own field. So there are some new examples. These are also startup companies mainly, who really try to develop new building products, mainly in the interior design related materials that are coming from another resource. So for instance, I'm aware of companies who are experimenting with different kind of materials, textiles or natural materials, which could be reused, for instance, for acoustic panels that can be mounted on the ceiling or the walls. And these are also more or less artistic items. So I'm not sure whether they will got to the point when it's going to be mass produced, or is it the intent that they create something unique, which is really a design element in its own. But I think it's a really exciting era when we can see such experiments where new developers come up with ideas where they try to really make something new out of someone else's waste. I think it's not a common field yet, but I hope this is a new approach that is going to be exploited a little bit better. And maybe this is the point where these different kind of industries could join their forces together and see, what is my waste? Could it be some resource for somebody else? And how could we really keep these materials in the loop without putting them somewhere as waste? And here it comes how we can upcycle instead of downcycle. So meaning that we can create something valuable out of those waste materials, and not degrading their quality, but rather using them for something more valuable, and therefore keeping them longer in this chain. I think also the industrial design can have some outlook in this kind of approach. I would be really curious about what András would say about this.
Yeah, it's interesting. In product design, the key is that use a minimal supply chain. That you should design something that's possible to be produced in a smaller scale supply system. So when you use less type of material, you use less technology that needs to be imported from somewhere very, very far away, is the key for a sustainable product, I think. And we always determined to try to keep the scale as small as possible. If we talk about the supply chain and the whole production system, so we need to reduce all the time, and that's a key for a good product construction, actually, or a good product.
Okay, we are a little bit out of time, so I have just one more question to you to find a kind of conclusion about this talk. How do you see your role in this new system? If you could just manifest it, let's say, or somehow explain it.
Can I start?
Why not?
I think my first responsibility is to educate the clients, and to make to give them good opportunities for solutions that that are sometimes more economical than just keeping their line of products that are not circular at all. I can guide them in using better materials, reuse recycled materials. I can help them to make better constructions. So the actual construction of the product is that means it can be taken apart, it can be easily refurbished or easily repaired. And the third thing, which is very, very important, is the value of good design itself from the emotional side. So I mean, if you design something that's not a thing that becomes that becomes obsolete in like some years, but from the aesthetical side, but just sort of out of it's not getting out of fashion, it's not getting out of style, it makes some sort of emotional attachment with the user. That's I think something that visible, and you cannot really talk about it as an aspect of circular economy and circular design for circularity. But this is very, very important, because if you like a product, if you have some emotional attachment for it, then you will keep it for a long time. And then at the end, if you liked it, there is a possibility that somebody else will like it 10 years later, and you can resell it and keep the product in its primary use for as long as possible. And that's what we designers, I think, can do, and what's the most important part of our job in this field.
Thank you. Dia, Veronica, could you continue?
Yeah, sure. I would core everything that Andras mentioned. I think educating and guiding towards a circular economy and our stakeholders to really understand how can we design for circularity, and not only products again, but the systems. And I also second the thought of valuing and cherishing the products and services that we create. I do share the thought that creating something is not only about creating that something, it has an emotional aspect to it as well. I always like to say that people don't necessarily buy what you sell, they buy an emotion and what it helps them to, what needs does it fulfill in their spiritual and emotional or aspect. So it kind of goes back to the basic needs and the psychological needs that and why we like to buy something, or maybe even rent if we look at the new business models as well. The other aspect is I think the fashion industry plays a big role is really powering the circular systems and the ecosystem that we can create. And I think the fashion industry, being such a global industry employing so many people, has the power to really shift and transform and support the transition to a circular economy. So generate collaborations and really have a not competitive but much more collaborative approach towards how can we together create a system that works for everyone, and that is circularity.
I agree with Veronica, and definitely actually education from our side, because we are not designers, and designers have a very big power with their decisions how circular and sustainable the products will become. But as sustainability managers, I think we have the role to educate our own colleagues as well, and to keep pace with the latest technologies, the latest innovations, the latest best practices that we could implement. And those are the things that we need to teach our own colleagues. That's why we have meetings with almost all departments, from design through merchandising to sourcing and marketing, because we just have to get those messages and explanations across to everyone, so that they can use it in their everyday decisions. And I think there is one more important aspect, which may be not so closely related to circularity, but it's to empower people in the supply chains to consider who are doing the jobs across the supply chain, and also to discover that by deciding how we make what we make, like how we make ceramic buttons, for example, and just by deciding on how we want to produce what we produce, we can have a really good impact on other people's lives. Like, we can create job opportunities to other people, and that's not part of material circularity, but ethical and social circularity is definitely another important aspect of sustainable thinking about products and production.
And also sharing this, all of the resources and the possibilities. Tia, could you finish with some thoughts?
Yeah, I think what is really a common line in all fields that I recognize is the role of education and to spread the ideas and the knowledge. As a sustainability consultant in the construction industry, I could also highlight this, that our main role is to guide and support our designers to use the proper materials, to keep in mind certain aspects while the design. It's also how to consciously reduce the materials needed only to the point where these are really necessary, how to make choices of materials and where to procure them. And also it's kind of an education for our clients who order these designs, because usually they are also not familiar with these concepts. And my impression is that they learn a lot during this design process where they participate, and most of them are really interested and open about these new knowledge. And on the other hand, when we support the design with this approach, it also puts a larger pressure on the manufacturers, for instance, because when more and more design groups are demanding certificates about their materials and certain information, then they are under pressure to produce these kind of certificates and make transparent their materials. And this is really kind of a loop where this whole industry has impact on one another, and everybody can develop further in this area. So I think we are in a very exciting era, and I hope that these lines and these industries can get together a little bit more closer, and everybody can look out of their own field, because as we can see already in the examples of startups, it's really clear that there is really space for more cooperation. And I think if we openly cooperate and put together these ideas, then we can achieve even better results with regards to recycling and being more sustainable in our product designs and how we use these materials.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts, and also thank you very much to let us take a look in your field and company. How do you do it? And I think, yeah, the next step is education, and to to break through those silos between different fields and find new touch points between these sectors. And I'm very happy to see personally that you are working on it, and there are many Hungarian companies who are enthusiastically working on a better planet, let's say. So thank you very much for your time and your thoughts, and have a nice day, and I hope we will meet again and talk about this topic more and more in front of public and between each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.